folks, how you doing? How you feeling? Welcome to my dissection of the latest sequel to the Breath of the Wild teaser that we just got recently shown over at E3 2021. If you didn't see my reaction, I'll link it up right here where you can see my unadulterated reaction, because you'll see I waited a long time for this presentation, to watch this presentation. I decided to do a little breakdown of this trailer, seeing as, you know, we got a lot of new information regarding the story. We just got to see a lot of gameplay from this literally 2-minute trailer, and there's been a lot of fan theories going around the internet that I said I need to put 2 and 2 together myself, because I mean I just need to. If you haven't seen my other trailer breakdowns, I'll link them up here. So first we got the Nintendo Switch. Of course, it's coming for the Nintendo Switch. Shout out to all the people who thought we were gonna get the Switch Pro before E3, counting myself. But first, obviously, we get a pretty clear shot of what is essentially malice. It is essentially the hatred that is just pouring out of Calamity Ganon, basically what controlled the Guardians in Breath of the Wild, what corrupted the Guardians in Breath of the Wild, and basically the source of anything and everything that is evil in Hyrule, in this Hyrule at least. Here in the next shot we get Link. He's still wearing the champion's tunic, and we can also see the base over here of the Master Sword. But this is the only shot of the whole trailer where we see the Master Sword in Link's hands. Here we can see Link grabbing his right hand, which means, you know, it's being consumed by malice. It is either him being consumed by malice, or essentially what a lot of the fan theories going around is that the reason why we don't see the Master Sword in the rest of the trailer is that the Master Sword was corrupted or destroyed by malice. After these, we keep getting another shot of malice, which is pretty straightforward. You know, it seems to be a theme. We know that this next entry into the Legend of Zelda series, specifically the sequel to Breath of the Wild, is a lot darker than we're used to. We continue to see malice basically rising from the bottom of the screen. Whether this is a symbol or this is a signifier of the malice coming from the ground up, which kind of alludes to me that this malice is stemming from Ganon's body, which, as we saw in the first trailer, both Link and Zelda are exploring caves, and this is when they find or bump into what is essentially the mummified body of Ganondorf. This leads me to believe that somewhere, somehow, Ganondorf, being speculated to be underneath Hyrule's castle, must have been used as a source of power. You know, he is the holder of the Triforce of Power, and as we all know, the stuff that powers Guardians, for example, at least corrupted Guardians, is malice. So there is some element to malice being a source of energy for a lot of things. Ganon was captured, sealed, and held underneath Hyrule Castle and used as a source of power to power the Guardians, to power a lot of the different technology around Hyrule, and that's how it became easily corrupted. And this can be corroborated by the huge pillars that rise up from underneath Hyrule Castle in Breath of the Wild. You remember those huge black, you know, kind of pillars that just protrude outwards away from Hyrule Castle? That kind of leads me to believe that this malice that we see, this shot that we see right here, is symbolism for the malice that's protruding or coming from underneath Hyrule Castle. In this next shot, a lot of people were saying that this was Ganondorf somewhat falling, but I took it as Ganondorf raising his hands, saying, "Come, my children, come, malice, come up from the ground up. These fools have kept me prisoner for so long." And as we both know, and shout out to a good friend of the channel, Jay the Kid, he made a really good point underneath one of my tweets, replying to some of these fan theories, saying that this is not the first instance of war crimes, of torture, of people being held against their will in Zelda. The Shadow Temple, where it was basically a Sheikah torture chamber and prison for the enemies of the royal family. Like, this really does lead me to believe that where Ganondorf was being held, he was being held against his will. He was obviously sealed, but I feel he was also used as a source of power. There's only one way as to how he corrupted guardians so easily, and you know, the pillars protruding from Hyrule Castle, it just means he was held against his will underneath Hyrule Castle. But here we see obviously Ganondorf, his mummified body. We see him in the tunic. Please pay close attention to the tunic that he has. It's covering his left shoulder, but just pay attention to that garb because it's on his left shoulder, and that's very important for the next stuff that I'm going to be talking about. We also see Ganondorf chest, the chest that was held by that green hand in the first trailer, if you recall. People are alluding that this is the scar in his chest, basically where, you know, he was executed by the goddesses or the servants of the goddesses. I can't quite remember, from Twilight Princess, when he's being held against his will and he's about to be basically sealed in the Twilight realm. If you recall that the gods insert a holy sword right in his chest, but that does not kill him. But he does keep the scar throughout the whole game of Twilight Princess, and that is a very, very big part of Twilight Princess, which leads me to also believe that this may be the same Ganondorf from Twilight Princess. This scar is also where the Master Sword basically killed Ganondorf in Twilight Princess. And if we compare a lot of the stuff, you know, as far as symbols in Twilight Princess and this new sequel to Breath of the Wild, you'll start to see that maybe these two stories are very, very well connected. We got the scar in the chest where Link laid the final blow to Ganondorf. We also see in Ganondorf's robe in Twilight Princess something eerily similar that I'll recall later in this video, but let's keep on going through the video. But yes, things to note in this: his chest wound, his scar, and the garb that is on this left hand side. In this next shot, we see Zelda essentially falling into a chasm. This basically ties another shot from the first trailer for Breath of the Wild 2, in which we see, you know, the caverns, kind of the rocks underneath both Zelda and Link kind of falling apart, as if there was an earthquake, as if something was rumbling underneath, as if something was rumbling in that cave, which leads to believe that they might have either broken the seal to Ganondorf, or they just found Ganondorf and he was resurrected. As we recall from the first trailer, there is a sequence of events where this happens after Zelda falls. First, Link reaches for Zelda and grabs her by the hand, and then afterwards the green Zonai-like hand arm grabs Link from the other side, which this ties into the theory that in this game we'll be able to play two kinds of Links, and there's some connections there to time travel. After that, it cuts to black, and then we see a harsh kind of light at the end of the tunnel, similar to what we saw at the beginning of Breath of the Wild. So it's drawing parallels to the first game, obviously. And afterwards, we also see basically a reference to Skyward Sword. We see what we think is Link falling from the skies in a similar style as that he used to fall in Skyward Sword. It's kind of a reference, and it's trying to link this game to Skyward Sword in a sense, because we also see underneath this Link, an island, a floating island. Basically, it's an island connected through pathways, or to little stone paths, as you can see down there in the top right corner. And also remember when I said that you should pay attention to Ganondorf's garb and where it's placed. It's placed over his left shoulder. Here Link, he has somewhat of the same style of clothing as the mummified Ganondorf does. Is that a coincidence? Does that mean that the hero from 10,000 years ago was Ganondorf? Because if you recall, in the first game, when Impa is telling the story of Hyrule, she talks about the hero, the original hero that saved Hyrule 10,000 years ago. This hero famously has the same garb over their left shoulder. It also has long hair, much like this character does currently on screen. But also, the hero from 10,000 years ago has red hair. Who else has red hair? That's right, the Demon King himself, Ganondorf. Now, of course, this I'm not saying that this is a playable Ganondorf, but I'm also not saying this is not a playable Ganondorf. I'm just saying there's a lot of parallels there. There's a lot of similarities between the two characters. That might not even be Ganondorf. You know what I'm saying? Down in the below Hyrule Castle, which, I mean, I don't know about that. Now a whole theory is popping up in my head. What if that mummified being was actually the Link from 10,000 years ago, and he was the seal to Ganondorf? And I'll get... Yo. Anyway, here, this Link, which I'll call the hero from 10,000 years ago, does have a very unique characteristic, and that's his right arm. His right arm is not made of flesh and bones, as you can tell from this quick little shot where he's falling. Here we see him with obviously the garb over his left shoulder. We see him in what is essentially kind of like a skirt, so to speak, and also some high knee sandals, kind of like the Romans did back in the day. So this also kind of leads me to believe that this Link is from the past. In this next shot, we also see the same Link, somewhat I want to call, floating again between islands. Here we get a better look at what the islands are. Now there are 3 floating islands, as we can kind of tell. There might be 4, because over there in the back on the left, it seems like there's another island over there. They all seem to be at different heights. Each of them might be different dungeons, different worlds. They might either interconnect, and you might be able to travel freely between them. But what is most important to note here is on the right, there is somewhat of a stone tower. It kind of looks like a stone tower to me. You know, it kind of started clicking in my head. I'll talk about that stone tower later. Let's focus on this a little bit more. This Link, this hero, we'll call him, he has the same high knee sandals, but now he has somewhat of a kind of padding on it, which leads me to believe that there's also still going to be some customization or some outfits that you can discover or unlock. But also the shield. The shield has symbols that kind of resemble the Sheikah symbol a lot. Not really the same symbol, but it does draw a lot of parallels to the Sheikah symbol. Also the glider. The glider here is very noteworthy, as Zeltic, a amazing Zelda tuber, kind of reference, you know, in early concept art of Breath of the Wild, the glider actually had 2 streamers coming out from the back. So this leads you to believe that a lot of the ideas that are being used in this sequel are ideas that were either unused in the first game or that were just completely scrapped. And you'll see some ideas that you can kind of draw parallels to the art book that basically was released with Breath of the Wild. After this, we get this magnificent shot, this absolutely beautiful shot. This gave me goosebumps. Like, besides the music being majestic as hell, this shot gave me a lot of goosebumps. Obviously, this, you can tell that Link, or this hero, so to speak, is not in the surface, is not on the surface of Hyrule. This looks like one of the islands, one of the floating islands, as you can tell, you know, from looking up. Also noteworthy here are the clouds. The clouds are a lot more animated in this shot, in this game, which obviously kind of makes me believe that we're going to be playing between 2 completely different worlds. We're going to be playing between the Sky World and what is essentially Hyrule Field, or Hyrule in general. But here, I found this a little bit interesting. We see 3 birds flying. Now, the constant theme in all Zelda games is that there's always 3 parts to the Triforce. There's the Triforce of Wisdom, which is Zelda, the Triforce of Power, which is Ganondorf, and the Triforce of Courage, which is Link. Now, I'm not saying that this is kind of like alluding to the fact that these 3 people might work together or might have some sort of deeper connection that they did in Breath of the Wild, but I'm also not saying that. You know what I mean? Also, something noteworthy is the gates down in the further down the this path, or this corridor, or this island, is you see a gate. This gate basically resembles a torii. A torii is a traditional Japanese gate, most commonly found at the entrance of a shrine, a Shinto shrine, where it kind of marks symbolically, of course, the transition from the mundane to the sacred. Now, this is drawing a lot of parallels with this person being in a completely different era than Breath of the Wild Link. If this gate is basically alluding to the fact that Link is somewhat in the world of the gods, because, you know, these are fantastical places, these are floating islands. Like, this kind of feels that Link will be dealing with a lot of the gods, with a lot of like the forces, the forces that you cannot see in Hyrule. For example, the dragons in Breath of the Wild. Famously, you cannot really interact with them besides throwing a few arrows at them, and they'll drop some scales here and there. But after them doing their little rounds around Hyrule, they go up into the sky into somewhat of a portal into the clouds. Now, if you remember from Skyward Sword, this layer of clouds separates both the sky and the ground, Hyrule and Skyloft. Does this mean that this area where this hero is currently where this hero is venturing out is nothing but the lands of the gods? Once the dragons disappear up in the portal in the sky, you don't see them ever. And these dragons, they are revered as gods themselves. Next up, we have a very interesting shot of what to me looks like some kind of mythical guardian type of beast, but not so much in the sense of the typical guardians that we know. This to me looks like Godon. If you remember Godon from Wind Waker, you know that Godon is basically the guardian of the Tower of the Gods, and he is the one who puts the hero, the chosen one, to test to really see if this person is worthy of being the hero, of being claimed as the hero. And something noteworthy is Zonais. I haven't talked a lot about Zonai technology, Zonai magic. The Zonai are characterized by a few things. First, they really revere dragons, much like the dragons that we see in Breath of the Wild, that go up into the sky and disappear through the portal that separates sky and earth. And as you can tell from a lot of the symbolism in the Zonai ruins are basically heads of dragons. But also something very characteristic of the Zonai are green technology, is green. And we've seen a lot of green magic, so to speak, in the first trailer of Breath of the Wild, with the little symbols forming in the air. And now we also see it in this golem / guardian / I don't know, just a rock beast. If you can see, like in the neck area, so to speak, there is somewhat of this green magic flowing through this beast, this guardian. And this leads me to believe that these are Zonai creatures. These are guardians created by the Zonai, which also kind of ties in the idea that the Zonai are famously known to have disappeared from Hyrule, leaving behind everything, leaving behind their ruins, but not leaving any evidence of themselves in Hyrule, which kind of ties in together of them disappearing, going to the skies, following their gods, their dragon gods, into the sky portal and making a home for themselves in the sky, and kind of creating these guardians with their green magic technology. Also, we see some symbolism here. We see a symbol on what is essentially kind of like the belt or the midriff area of this guardian, which looks like a broom for some reason. I don't know why. And we also see some of the same markings that we see in the Zonai ruins around that little symbol. I don't know what to make of this character. I just know it looks like a frog. It kind of reminds me of the Wind Brothers that you see in Wind Waker, that teach you a lot of the songs for you to control the wind, so you can sail between islands in Wind Waker. There's a lot of flying in this game apparently, and there's a lot of flying between islands. So will you be able to control the wind in Breath of the Wild 2 so you can travel between islands? Maybe these guys are the embodiment of those same frog gods that we saw in Wind Waker. I don't know. That's something for you to think about. here's another interesting shot. I kind of appreciate it. I think this is just something cool. This is something very cool, you know, mixing enemies with one another. This kind of excites me. It makes me believe that there's going to be a lot more variation of enemies, hopefully a lot more different kinds of enemies, because that's something that we all know that Breath of the Wild lacked. Now, something very characteristic about these bokoblins, which I'm sorry I've been calling them goblins, I completely forgot. They have their horns sticking out. Now, in Breath of the Wild, they have little tiny horns, but this leads me to believe that these bokoblins kind of grew up, you know, kind of to signify the passage of time. And also, I don't know if bokoblins and moblins are related, but I mean, there's a lot of parallels between them, right? They both have horns. The moblins obviously have huge horns. So does this mean these are just teenage bokoblins? I don't know. That's just funny to think about. After this, we get a closer look at the arm, the greenish Zonai-like arm that we've seen in the previous trailer that was holding onto Ganondorf's slash the original hero's dehydrated, mummified body. Here, interestingly enough, we can tell that this is the same character from the beginning of the trailer because of the markings on his right arm, right shoulder. Now, this shot is very, very interesting. This shot, we see a few things. We see Link, first of all, using stasis, but using stasis without the Sheikah Slate. The Sheikah Slate is none to be found anywhere around Link's right hand. However, we do see a light emit from Link's right hand, which this kind of alludes to the fact that Link might be using the Triforce of Power here to control objects in the world. Famously, in a lot of the Zelda games, Link has a marking on his hand, on the back of his hand. Sometimes it's the left hand, sometimes the right hand, in which the Triforce appears, and one of the Triforce pieces glows to signify that he is the holder of the Triforce Courage. Now, the link between Sheikah technology and the Triforce of Courage, I'm not really too sure on that. Now, here, interestingly, not only does Link use stasis, but we also see kind of the world turn gray, and then we see the same spike ball reverse in time and attack the enemies. Now, what does that mean? First, maybe Link just used a new form of stasis. However, we've been seeing a lot of time traveling, and we've been seeing a lot of mentions of the hero from 10,000 years ago. And I think it's safe to say that the Link, or the character that we see up in the sky, is not the same Link from Breath of the Wild. The character that we see up in the sky has longer hair, has the arm, the magic green Zonai arm, and we just don't see that character's face. So what is Nintendo trying to tell us here? Now, in this next shot, which is a very interesting shot, and this ties in more into the Zonai theories, into the Zonai technology and the Zonai relationship with this game. Here we can see Link basically holding up his shield, but in front of his shield he has the head of a dragon, very similar to the same dragon statue heads that we see in the Zonai ruins. And as we said, the Zonai used to kind of revere as gods the dragons that we see in Breath of the Wild. Now, also very interesting, we see a new type of enemy here attacking Link. This type of enemy reminds me a lot of the older kind of enemies. You know, these are very similar enemies that we've seen in Ocarina of Time, for example. Also, interesting to note here, before Link jumps back, we can see on the inside of this statue slash weapon, whatever we want to call it, the same green markings that we've seen being associated with the Zonai. Is this Zonai technology left behind by the gods? Something that Link and Zelda discovered down there below when they saw the mummified body of this strange being being held by the same green arm that now Link possesses? Hello? Now, this shot basically confirms what I've been talking about. Time travel. Here we see basically the reversal of a drop of water. People have been speculating, and I tend to believe now, that we will be playing as this hero from 10,000 years ago. Now, how will this dynamic work? If this hero is the one from 10,000 years ago, does that mean that these playable parts in which we're up in the sky are more so flashbacks, because as we all know, Breath of the Wild relied a lot on flashbacks for their storytelling. Maybe, maybe not. Spoiler alert, if you haven't beaten Age of Calamity, skip to this time, whatever I put up in the screen. There's time travel. If Age of Calamity story is anything to go by, is that time travel is now accessible to the people in Breath of the Wild. They've discovered the technology, they found a way to open portals and go back in time. So these sky areas might not just be playable memories or flashbacks. Maybe we do go back in time and play as the hero of legend and try to understand the story as to how this whole thing happened. Now on this shot, something very interesting happens. First of all, we see the symbolism with the raindrop of it going back up into the sky, of it going back before it fell and hit the ground. Here, Link, this character, this hero, is seen being beamed up into the sky, straight into one of the into the ground of one of these islands. Now, does that mean that we'll be able to swap between the sky area and the ground area easily, meaning playing two different eras? Meaning that, is this the form of transportation or the form of traveling or traversing between the ground and the sky? We've yet to find out, but this does draw parallels with time travel. We see the same hero pop up and into what is essentially kind of like a shrine of some sorts. And interestingly, here we see on the lamps, I'll call them lamps, they have very similar shapes to the guardian that we saw, guardian golem, whatever we want to call it, that we saw prior, the frog guardian, so to speak. And then here we see what we essentially saw in the first trailer, Hyrule Castle being lifted from the ground and basically destroyed, and it floating up in the sky. We see the malice here seeping from underneath, much as I said in the beginning of this video, which kind of leads you to believe that the seal was broken from Ganon and he was released up into the world. And then we get the iconic shot, very much similar to what we saw in the first trailer for Breath of the Wild, the sequel to Breath of the Wild. And this is where we also hear a different version of Zelda's lullaby. Now, there are a few things to note here. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of relation, a lot of talk. There's going to be a lot of parallels being drawn from the Zonai, being drawn from these sky islands being, you know, unreachable by normal Hylians, by normal people down in Hyrule Field. And this new character being able to use Zonai magic basically, and it kind of also leads me to believe that this is the story of how and why the Zonai disappeared completely from Hyrule. Now, Barrett Courtney here has a very good video. They're from Kind of Funny Games, has a very good video on the theories and basically a good trailer breakdown, much like I did. This video is basically what inspired me to do this dissection, because there's just so many things to unpack on this trailer. It's less than 2 minutes and it's just jam-packed with information. And this is where essentially I realized that maybe this hero is not Link. Maybe this hero that's seen up in the sky, first of all, is the hero from 10,000 years ago, but maybe this hero is also Ganondorf. And we get to hear the story of how Ganondorf got corrupted by Demise. Now, as we all know, Demise is the villain, is the main antagonist in Skyward Sword. And Barrett makes a very good point. There's a reason why in the Nintendo Direct there wasn't a Zelda collection. There wasn't a Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, Ocarina of Time, whatever kinds of 3D games you wanted in that collection. There's a reason why Nintendo didn't put that out. They want people to play Skyward Sword to understand where this whole sky area stems from, and how the creation of Hyrule since the very beginning kind of began, and to make the story of Breath of the Wild 2 more understandable for people who might just need a refresher. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why there wasn't a Zelda collection being released at the Nintendo Direct. Nintendo wants people to play Skyward Sword to understand the beginning of the Zelda series, because canonically Skyward Sword is the first game in the whole story, in the whole lore of the Zelda series. It's where we get to see the curse put on by Demise to Link, Zelda, Ganondorf, and this vicious cycle that continues going on. This also brings up thoughts and ideas of Link, Zelda, Ganondorf trying to break this cycle that they were put on for eternity. And also, this whole theory is being fueled by Nintendo themselves. Here, IGN reports, Nintendo says the sequel to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild does have a title, but they aren't announcing it yet because it could clue players into what happens in the game. It's going to be time traveling. I'm sure there's going to be time traveling in the title. If not, they're just going to flat out say Zonai or something to that effect. Something to the effect. But folks, you tell me what you think. Who is this hero from 10,000 years ago? Is it Ganondorf before he got corrupted by Demise? Or is this just a descendant from Link, and that mummified beast, that mummified creature that we see being held by that green arm, that's the descendant of Link trying to break the cycle put on them by Demise? We don't know yet. However, there is one thing I will say. There is an obvious connection to the Zonai in this game. And we're going to learn more about the Zonai and this weird tribe. But folks, I've been True Fernie. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe. If you didn't like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs down, because every single bit helps. As you can tell, I'm a huge Zelda nerd. I love this kind of stuff. My first gaming video ever on this channel was speculating and kind of giving my hopes as to what I wanted for Breath of the Wild 2. You can check it out up here in the up here. I'll link it. It's a little dated now, because you know, now that we got more of a deeper look as to what Breath of the Wild 2 is going to be about, I don't think we're going to get these items anymore. But at the same time, we did see that dragon head spitting fire, so you never know. You never know. Links to my socials are down below. Please make sure to follow me on Twitch, where I try and stream pretty regularly. Also, make sure to follow me on Twitter, where I scream into the void that is social media and where you will find me most of the time. And also, please make sure to join our Discord, where we talk things like this: theories, game theories, gaming news, anime, TVs, anything and everything that might interest you as my viewer. Also, if you didn't know, I have a podcast called Search and Report. You can listen to it on the go. Just search on Spotify for Search and Report. You'll find us. Our logo is a little Game Boy. You will not miss it. Alternatively, you can watch the video version of that podcast here on my YouTube channel. So make sure to subscribe and keep up to date on gaming news and all the latest and greatest. But folks, please take care of each other, but most importantly, take care of yourself. Ganondorf did nothing wrong. Don't at me. Peace.